Chapter 1. The Boy of Many Dreams. In the heart of Nineveh, where the Tigris River coursed through the mighty Assyrian kingdom, the streets bustled with life. The air was filled with the hum of merchants bargaining in the markets, the clatter of pottery carts on cobblestone roads, and the distant chants of temple priests calling upon Asher, god of creation and justice. Towering ziggurats, their golden tips shimmering under the blazing sun, stood as symbols of the kingdom's power and devotion to the divine. Nineveh was a city of abundance, where every corner revealed a new craft or trade. The markets were a kaleidoscope of colors and scents, vivid blue dyes from Babylon, shimmering silks from distant lands, baskets overflowing with figs and pomegranates. Bakers sold flatbreads sprinkled with sesame seeds, their aroma mingling with the tang of fermented date wine. Stone masons chiseled intricate carvings into temple walls, while blacksmiths hammered molten bronze into spearheads and ornaments. It was a city that celebrated skill and mastery, where craft was not just a means of survival, but a source of pride and identity. In this vibrant world of artisans and merchants lived Tirzah, a slender 14-year-old, wry from days spent running through the city's alleys and climbing trees along the riverbanks. His thick dark hair fell in unruly waves, and his tunic, dyed a deep indigo, was often stained with traces of his most recent project. Around his waist he wore a leather belt, where he tucked small tools or scraps of parchment for sketching ideas. Tirzah's family lived in a modest home built from mud brick, its walls cool in the sweltering Assyrian heat. A reed mat covered the floor of the central room, and niches in the walls held oil lamps and clay jars. On good days, the house smelled of roasted lamb seasoned with coriander and garlic, the stew bubbling in a bronze pot over the fire. On leaner days, they shared lentils and barley bread, accompanied by dried dates from the market. His father, Uriah, was a carpenter, a man of few words but strong hands. His mother, Layla, wove cloth for the market, her loom a constant presence in their home. She dyed her threads in rich hues, crimson from madder roots, indigo from distant lands, and Tirzah often watched her work, mesmerized by the way her hands moved with such confidence and purpose. Uriah often looked upon his son with a mix of pride and concern. "You have the spark of greatness in you, Tirzah," he said one evening as they shared a meal. "But a spark is not enough. A flame must be tended or it will sputter and die." Tirzah's younger sister, Zara, giggled at this. "He will master everything, father," she said teasingly. "Potter, scribe, mason, he will be all of them at once." But Tirzah's mother did not laugh. She touched her son's shoulder and said softly, "Your father speaks true. The gods bless those who commit themselves. A man who digs many wells finds no water." Bright with curiosity, his eyes often wandered to the craftsmen lining the streets of Nineveh. He could lose hours watching a potter shape clay on a spinning wheel, the wet earth rising like magic under skilled hands. At another moment, he might be found peering into a scribe's workshop, fascinated by the rhythmic scratching of styluses carving cuneiform onto clay tablets. Every craft he encountered sparked a fire in his heart, and every master craftsman became, if only briefly, a figure to emulate. But Tirzah's admiration was also his undoing. Craftsmanship was a child of commitment. So to be a true craftsman, one had to dedicate years to mastering a single skill, honing it until it was second nature. Yet Tirzah could not choose. His mind flitted from one dream to another, each more exciting than the last, with gleeful infidelity. One week, he borrowed his uncle's pottery wheel and declared, "I shall become the greatest potter in Nineveh." For days, his hands spun the wheel, shaping clay into vases and bowls. But when the vessels cracked in the kiln or slumped into uneven forms, Tirzah's enthusiasm waned. By the end of the week, the wheel lay forgotten in the corner of his home, gathering dust. The next week, he became enamored with the temple scribes. He convinced a family friend to teach him the basics of cuneiform, but after mastering a few symbols, his attention wandered to the masons carving reliefs for the palace walls. The chisels felt powerful in his hands, and for a while, Tirzah imagined himself immortalizing the gods in stone. But this too was short-lived, abandoned when the effort proved greater than his initial spark of excitement. Nineveh was not a city for dabblers. In the Assyrian culture, each man and woman was expected to find their role and excel. The potter's guild, the mason's brotherhood, the scribe's school, all demanded years of dedication before one could call themselves a master. To lack a craft or to fail to see one through was to risk being seen as aimless or lazy. Such people were often scorned, for they contributed little to the kingdom's wealth or glory. Tirzah knew this, and the weight of those expectations pressed upon him. He envied his friends, who seemed to have found their paths with ease. Natan, his childhood companion, was already apprenticed to a blacksmith and spoke proudly of the swords and plowshares he helped forge. Another friend, Eliah, had become a baker, rising before dawn each day to knead dough and stoke the ovens. Tirzah wanted to belong, to find his place among Nineveh's proud craftsmen. But how could he when every path seemed so tempting, so impossible to choose? The elder's visit. It was on one of these restless evenings, as Tirzah sat among his abandoned tools and half-finished projects, that Ittai appeared at their home. The elder was a figure of quiet authority, his silver beard glinting in the firelight as he entered the room. He leaned on a staff carved with the likeness of Asher, its polished surface gleaming like river stone. "Tirzah," the elder said, his voice as deep as the temple drums, "I have heard of your many ventures." Tirzah straightened, his cheeks flushing. Yes, I have tried many things." "But you have mastered none," Ittai said bluntly. His gaze was piercing but not unkind. "Tell me, boy, why do you flit from craft to craft like a bird that cannot find a tree?" Tirzah opened his mouth to speak, but the words caught in his throat. How could he explain the storm within him, the way his heart leapt at each new idea, only to falter when the work grew difficult? The elder studied him for a moment, then nodded. "You are not the first to struggle with such a restless spirit. But hear me, Tirzah. Asher favors those who endure. A man is not judged by the number of tasks he begins, but by the one he finishes. I shall give you a challenge." Tirzah's eyes widened. "A challenge?" Ittai smiled faintly. "Choose one craft, just one, and commit yourself to it for 7 days. At the end of those days, you will present your work at the temple. If you succeed, you shall find not only the favor of the gods, but also the respect of this city." The boy's heart raced. 7 days? It seemed an eternity. But the elder's words carried the weight of a command, and something deep within Tirzah stirred, a flicker of determination, fragile but real. "I will try," Tirzah said, his voice trembling but resolute. "Do not try," Ittai replied, his gaze steady. "Do!" And with that, the elder departed, leaving Tirzah to face the most important decision of his young life. Would he rise to the challenge and discover the strength to focus his restless energy? Or would he falter as he always had before? Only time would tell. Only time would tell.